of us that are
Is
here.
Julie official
Julie
part
said,
of it?
no, but she's coming, I hope, at some point. Okay, so call this to order. And the vision statement, do people have any comments, changes on that?
I thought it was fairly succinct and summed up what we're trying to do.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
Hi, Julie.
Good morning.
No, we just
We're
started.
just starting. I wanted to add one word. I wanted to say Sylvania becomes an attractive and useful asset, or a useful and attractive asset, just so it's not looking like it does, if that's okay. Or maybe put it after useful, I don't know. And should we call it Sylvania,
Sylvania site?
or the lead band site? I mean, it isn't Sylvania anymore,
No, hasn't been for a while.
so maybe we should call it the lead bands Waldeboro site.
We say the Sylvania now Lead Vance site.
Or just call it what it is. I mean, it
Lead
is.
Vance site, yeah. The people aren't gonna know.
Lead Vance LLC site, formerly Osram, Sylvania.
Okay.
Hello.
So might as well call it what it is.
Good morning.
Okay.
The former Sylvania
Good.
site, perhaps?
How's everything
Formerly
with the fire?
Osram, Sylvania.
Yeah.
Just don't want to add too much to it.
I know, I just feel like we should call it what it is, though.
Formerly Osram, Sylvania.
But we can just put that as a little footnote, whatever. Okay, any other changes? Okay. Well, Mark had been going over, oh, Julie just left. So we've gone over this. So is there more? We've all just looked at it.
Yep.
Is there more you want to tell us about it?
No, like I said, I interviewed 12 people. I didn't see any or hear anything that sounded like we hadn't heard it before. There's some interesting tidbits of information in there about just the people's reactions to the sale of Sylvania and stuff. You know, they really thought Sylvania was a great company, and then to a person, they all said it went downhill after it got sold. But yeah.
Are there any things you think we should follow up on?
Like I said, nothing that raised any red flags. I wasn't sure, well, we talked about the diluting the acids, neutralizing the acids through limestone and then letting it run into the creek. That was the first thing I don't think I'd heard about before. And I don't know exactly where that would have happened. I know there are a couple of those little creek beds that run down that site.
The big one that was running when we took a walk up down there.
Everyone said that there were never any serious safety concerns. They had a hazmat team that was never used. They had a factory-wide alarm system which never went off. There were some spills that happened mostly with the acids. They said the gaskets would wear out and they'd have to evacuate the room and put on protective gear to replace the gaskets and stuff, but everybody seemed to think it was a pretty well-run plant, especially after the regulations were introduced in the late 60s.
Did anyone say anything that contradicted things other people said?
No,
Wow.
I didn't, you know, I was pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah.
Then one mentioned the leak with the glass pipe,
Yeah.
but just one mentioned that.
And there were, I mean, depending on what their jobs were, I mean, they ran from mechanic to head of quality control, so some people say, well, I don't know, that wasn't, you know, part of my thing, so. And where I have NA down on this, then no one gave a response to any of that question ever, so,
Was Liz Dinsmore on the list?
no.
We could add her if you have an inclination to. she was ready to talk and had to say some things.
If you want to send me her
I will.
information, I'm
I have
happy to interview her and add her to the, so I have a spreadsheet file, and it's broken down into worksheets, pages.
Yeah, it's good.
And
It's a lot of
each,
work.
the front page is a list of all the contact information and the result of the interviews, whether it happened or not. Then there's a aggregate page where I just combined all the answers to each question on one sheet so we could see the breadth of the responses. And then the responses for each individual interview is on subsequent pages, so I can, when I add.
It'd be great if you could send that to everybody too.
Well, so I
You
wanted,
did.
I wanted to make sure that it was in the,
Central archive.
that format made sense to people before I shared it.
Oh, wait, did you share it
I
just with
shared
me?
the
Okay.
original one, I only think I had interviewed 3 people
No,
or
I
something.
have the one with all 12.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, I
Okay.
read that
Well,
this morning.
I cleaned it up a little bit, so.
good,
Yeah. So I'll just add, well, if you send me her information, I'll add, and I was gonna try and interview this guy, Nick Tabernakis, when he got back from Greece, because he was mentioned by several people as being a potentially good informant, and I think he was one of 2 people that worked in the asset room.
Well, maybe,
So-
His
if you're
son
gonna,
lives on River Road over here.
Yeah, and I've talked to his wife,
Okay.
and she's the Pat, and she's the one that said he was in Greece until mid-July. So
maybe over the course of the summer, follow up with those 2.
Yeah.
But hopefully we'll not find out anything too disturbing. So we were just going over the interview results and don't have anything,
I just took
Any-
everybody's responses and created one sheet.
Oh,
So
good.
you can see the breadth of responses to each question.
and he also has a file with all the individual responses, which,
Yeah.
and we've just decided there are 2 more people to follow up with over the summer, but no real red flags here.
Not as far as I know.
And they put acid in the stream, but it should be neutralized. They supposedly ran it through limestone. Well, that's good. Thank you for doing all that. And if, for those who haven't, you might want to just share the full file, because you in particular, since you might see things that
Okay, sure, yes.
I wouldn't understand if
No,
they're
I'll-
concerned.
We were talking about this before we started transcribing, and I noticed a couple of things. On the first page here, they actually delivered thorium and uranium to the site.
That's what they said, and they were used in the product, and I
The
didn't
glow
get any more
tubes,
detail.
probably. I mean, they,
It says uranium oxide. Is there such a thing?
Yes.
Would that have been used-
U3O8, yes, uranium
that-
oxide called yellow cake.
could that have been part of the glow tube operation?
So
I
they
don't
made the
know.
fluorescent starters, and then they did filaments.
Well, neon, I mean, if they're glow tubes, neon glow tubes, that's just 2 electrodes with neon gas in them, and that would be the glow tubes. But I can't think of any reason for them to be delivering thorium or uranium oxide to a filament plant.
Okay.
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, what happens is when I pass out the full file, we can see who gave that response, and then it might be worth a follow-up call just to,
Okay.
And they're both nuclear materials, so it's,
Well, that's why they did that shallow soil sampling, because if they thought there might be some, would it have been uranium or radium coming out of the,
well, there's uranium in all the rocks around here, so.
no, it wasn't in the rocks, it was in the tubes that were buried,
the glow
the
bottles or
glow
whatever.
bottles, or whatever they were called. They thought there might be some, but they didn't find it. So they did that series
Okay.
of shallow soil tests for that reason. So I'm just wondering if that was tied to that somehow.
Okay, and the other things that we discussed earlier was, I can state with pretty good certainty that there was never any liquid hydrogen on site. I mean, that is it's a very cold liquid. It's used in the space shuttle. It's hard to imagine that they would be using it on site.
Would there be any kind of hydrogen that they would have used?
Compressed hydrogen.
So maybe it was compressed hydrogen that just said liquid hydrogen.
Yeah, you can buy a bottle of hydrogen gas, you know,
Okay.
but liquid hydrogen now.
Uh,
EDTA polymer, that's an oxymoron. They're two different substances.
Are either a concern, or we just?
No.
Okay, so we won't worry
The
about that.
polymers, I mean, they're commonly used in wastewater treatment. I've used probably 10,000 tons in my life. And EDTA is a chelating agent that has nothing to do with, it's not a polymer.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so if you send everyone the full slate, and then you can look at it if you
Okay.
want, but it sounds, okay. Well,
Did they give you any feeling at all, or could they have? Probably not, but never hurts to ask. About the quantities they might have brought in during a given year or a given month, something to give us an idea of how much?
And that was the frustrating thing, is that people were very vague on specific details.
I think that's in the original DEP.
And there was nobody had said, oh yeah, we, brought in so much and would come in monthly or bi-weekly or whatever.
But I think that was in some of the, like the 1990 assessment report.
Yeah, there
Actually
was something
gave
in
some
there, but
information on how much.
it was
was
really
spent.
sketchy.
Yeah, because then pre-EPA, there
Yeah.
would have probably been no records. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point. Well,
Okay.
okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Mark. It's a lot of work. All right, so Julie, we're ready for an update on solar and Hofs's, where you're at or what's happening.
Solar has not moved. I guess Ron Phillips did not get a warm fuzzy feeling
Oh,
from it's been pushed up the food chain. I guess he's just waiting to talk to the attorney in Portland and see what's going on. Hofs's, it's interesting. Richard came in the day we did the walk and said that everything they wanted was out of the house.
Richard who?
Hofs's.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I'm
His
like,
sister's saying,
I don't know. So there's a
but
disconnect
they
probably.
have both communicated with me on that, and they both said, we don't want anything from the house. They both said that. Now I have that, I'll send the emails to you. I thought you were copied on those.
Right. So I think, what's happening with it is I think if there's a way for them to sell that, I think that's their end game with that piece of property.
The only thing Richard wanted was some blackberry plants at the back of the house that were over 100 years old.
No,
But I mean, other than that, I don't think.
Well, is there sort of is there anything we should be
There's- I
doing
don't-
or can do?
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
and as far as it being structural, it's all structurally sound. I mean, there's
Yeah, it's
nothing.
actually, I did peek in the window after I walk, and it's actually a beautiful house still. Nice trim and.
Right. It's on water and sewer, so there's no real issue. So I guess it is it would be something viable to sell if he
Yeah.
wanted to live next to that site.
Yeah.
I don't know how hard of a sell that would be. I did talk with, what was his name? The guy who's in charge now of the site.
Grimmer.
Grimmer. Jack Grimmer. About putting up a fence.
What he said.
He was going to explore that for us. I'm going to follow up with him on that
Or
because
even-
I just think if from the road it could be fenced and have some nice rose bushes and some
Yeah, or
evergreens
just
or something.
plantings.
It would just look 100% better.
Yeah.
And
And then, okay, so,
Sorry, do we want to write them a letter nevertheless, not the one we drafted the first time around, expressing the concerns of the Historical Society, not necessarily about the structure, but about the future of the house, because it's historically important, and somehow make them aware that the town attaches value, or at least someone in town attaches a value, historical value to it, with the idea that Sylvania or Leadvance would keep that in mind when they sell it, and encourage whoever buys it to.
if that's going to make you feel better, but that's all it's going to do is make you feel better
That's right.
because there's no teeth
I
to
agree
that
with
whatsoever.
you. I agree, 100%.
There's no teeth to that. We don't have a historic
No,
ordinance.
we don't.
the only reason to do it potentially is just so that people in town know that we let them
We
know
let
that.
them know. It's
Yeah.
a
So it would
feel-good
be
move,
more for
right.
the residents of the
Yeah.
town than.
So there's no harm in it, but don't expect.
Don't expect a
We
thing.
could rewrite it,
Yeah.
but, so it sounds like the town has no say on that. They'll do what they're gonna do, right?
I guess my take on this now is the town doesn't have say on what they do with the property.
Right.
I mean, they really don't. I mean, you know, I got the impression from Jack that there's not gonna be walking trails, you know, that's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got the impression that those are corporate decisions. What's the corporate liability? I mean, and we walked it. I'm not sure you'd want walking trail. I mean, from a liability standpoint,
Yeah,
You know,
with
you-
wells and all, they're,
between the wells,
And the ravines you can
the
fall
ravines,
down.
you can fall down. I mean, that's a lot of liability for a company. Plus the fact that somebody could say, I walked every day there for 20 years, and now I have a third ear. I mean, whether whether that's real or not, that's an issue that they would have to consider. And I mean, I don't know what, realistically, what we can ask them to do.
right. Well, I guess the only role I see us playing is maybe, you know, some towns actually lease or purchase the sites, but it sounds like we're not in a position to do that. So that's where
Is
it
that something
shifts.
we want to do? I mean, maybe that's the discussion that has to be had.
Yeah, like for the solar farm, but even so, we'd have to get over that main DEP hurdle of being able to put panels on the pad, because otherwise it's a real awkward array.
Right. And convincing the taxpayers to buy that property that's contaminated to put a solar farm on is going to be a very tough uphill battle.
Well, yeah, the liability issues of the town owning it,
Right.
I wouldn't see us wanting to do it. If it could be leased for some minimal amount of money and put panels on it, then I could
But
see
then
that.
if they wanted to do that, they would do it themselves because the tax advantages for them would be much more
Okay,
significant.
It'd
But
be a private deal.
yeah, and that's sort of what Ron is talking about.
right, but at least the off taker could be the schools, which would be some type of public benefit.
Yeah, yeah.
And that having moral support from the town wouldn't hurt
Right.
the process either. I mean, if we're-
But I do think that, I mean, I think I was more discouraged about the whole covenant being put in place
Yes.
without our,
Me too.
so it's just.
And not even understanding what it meant till we
Right.
saw the big squares that you can't do anything on it without a lot of trouble. So was I. Well, okay, so that's good to know, because I feel like, you know, our vision statement here.
I mean, I think it's good to ask them to consider these things, but I think the reality is, I know I'm such a Debbie Downer, but I think the reality is tough.
Yeah, well, that's what we need to know is the reality. Yeah. Well, I think it's worth a letter just saying we wanted
But
you
I
to
mean,
know that it
the
has.
ideal use for that is that solar farm.
I know, because nothing else really is gonna be feasible.
Yeah.
At least not on the pad, and that's if we can convince DEP to allow it on the pad, which is also an uphill battle, so.
Well, if there's any
Yeah.
way we can lend moral support to what Ron is doing, I think and they come up with a feasible plan for a solar farm, I think we ought to push it in a nice way so that Sylvania is aware of
Yeah.
the town's interest in having it done too.
Yeah, what would be Ledvance's motivation for wanting to hold on to that property?
I think ideally they'd love to sell it, but,
Right.
Right.
They would love to slough the liability.
yeah. And they still have to
I
do
mean,
the
they couldn't-
remediation
they couldn't-
forevermore.
We heard it from Max that they couldn't
They
get
can't
rid of the
do that.
liability. They're,
No.
whether they sell it or not, the liability stays with them.
Right, they have to do the
But,
remediation.
you know, at some level, it might be worth it to them, even if it just becomes a tax write-off, to get rid of that property, because then they don't have to worry about the upkeep, they don't have to worry about getting complaints from the town.
Question is who's gonna wanna buy it?
Well, so the Haas's property, could that be donated to the town for use as by the Historical Society, and it becomes a tax write-off for them because they've donated it? And the same thing with other acreage that they don't want. I mean, they may want to hold or retain, or we may want them to retain the 5 acres that are under covenant, but if there's any reason, I can't think of a reason why they would want to hold on to this property that can't be used for anything if other people want to use it.
Well, it sounds like they can sell the lot with the Hofs's property, but beyond that, I'm not, well, the Bangor site, I think the city bought, or somebody else bought. So it's not unprecedented, you know, maybe that's something we could research, is just to see what has happened with other sites. I know, it
Appeal
feels,
to their good corporate conscience or something like that.
yeah,
If we ended up with it though, we'd have to somehow
Do
find the
something with it.
money
And the Hoff's house, you know, Jean Lawrence implied that they had no money, you know, maybe they could raise money if there were some sort of bargain sale or donation. I mean, it'd be worth finding that out, but there's no way they're gonna, she didn't sound like they could raise money, even to
maintain or just
To
pay for
restore
water,
it.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
even to restore it, sounded like it was beyond their means, so.
The other question I had that came out of last meeting about the site is, you can't do anything to the pad, I understand that. But again, the natural degradation of that pad over I mean, they're not required to do an inspection again for 5 years.
Yeah, I know, and I asked if they could recap it because it's cracked enough that water's
Yeah.
infiltrating, but there's no requirement that they do. DEP is not requiring them to do that. DEP has to require them. They're not gonna do it without a DEP.
Is there any, can you think of any potential exposure that might happen as the cement pad just disintegrates due to the elements?
Well, I'm not an expert in underground geology and transport of solvents, so I gotta preface anything I say with that. But I do know that these solvents, most of them are not soluble in water, except at very low levels, and that they tend to form lenses, and they're heavier than water, so they tend to sink.
Okay, so,
I don't see leakage of water, groundwater into the, through cracks in the concrete. I don't see it being an issue. But again, I can.
Yeah, it's really more visual.
I'll defer to the experts, Max and whoever else on that.
And I
Yeah.
think must be seeing the same thing, because they're
Right.
not requiring a
Yeah.
pad, that it be kept up. So it's really just visual blight
yeah.
that we have to look at, and that's.
That's-
So Julie, I'm wondering if it's worth us writing two things, you know, a letter just saying, we just wanted you to know that this is considered an important historical building, and that, you know, we do consider the site to be visually
I think we should.
negative, and is there anything we can do to address these things? And then the other, so we could craft a letter like that, probably coming from you?
Yeah, I can send a letter. I'll craft it and circulate it. We can figure it out.
Okay,
I also think it's worth doing a letter supporting the solar project.
yeah,
I agree.
to Leadvance, yeah,
Just saying, look, we are in favor of this.
yeah.
You know, we would like to see this site repurposed, and that's a perfectly green repurposing.
Should that all be in one letter, or you think it should be
I
two?
think it's two. I think the Hofstas should be separate.
Opsis and the visual impact on the
Yeah.
town.
Certainly detrimental to the neighbors.
And I
who live
actually
there.
think that the solar farm should come from the select board.
Okay, so that'd be good.
Is that the project Ron's working on?
Yes.
And that would be a town project, or that would be?
No, that's a private project, but the off-taker for the electric would be the schools, which could save the
Quite a bit of
taxpayers
money.
of this town significant amounts of money.
And so what company's behind that project?
CEI.
So they would charge the town for the power that was generated by the solar?
Well, CEI wouldn't own it,
Well,
would they? They would just help
I don't know
fund it.
how, who would own it in the end, probably Leadvance would, but they would sell it to the schools, and that's how they would.
Or
it would be
CEI would
significant
get
savings.
Make some
investors to,
Yeah.
So they would make money off the sale, but the schools would save because the power.
The price of the power would be cheaper.
well, that's good. So, yeah, if we could do those, I think sooner is better, because I don't know when they're thinking of putting this house on the market.
I don't know that it's going on the market right away, and I think that's probably part of the whole testing the ground there and everything.
Yeah. Oh, waiting till they finish the test, yeah.
Did those wells get drilled?
They did. They were
Okay.
putting one in while we visited.
Okay.
And that was interesting to see how that worked. Okay, so the other thing I think it's time to do, even though we don't have anything really exciting or encouraging to report, is some publicity so people know what's going on. I mean, it can be just, you know, there's further testing, but I'm not sure how to
We
word it.
put
but-
it in the newsletter,
You did.
a little blurb about it.
No, I mean a newspaper article.
Oh, okay. We can do that.
You know, just giving an update, you know, of everything we've done, just to be transparent. And that and put the vision statement in, and, you know, that there is a large area that's restricted.
All we have to do is call Beth and
At
Alex,
Birmingham,
and they
yeah.
will.
And we can meet or just
Mhm.
talk to them.
Yeah, we should just talk with them both.
You want me to do that, or you want to do that?
Why don't we do it together?
Okay,
We'll come up with a time and do it together.
okay.
Is it worth soliciting anybody who else in the community that might have information about the old site?
You mean these interview?
Well, if we're putting something in the newspaper about the status of the commission's work, and then you say, we've conducted interviews with several former employees. If anybody else in the community has information to share, please contact so-and-so.
Could put that in.
I mean, I don't know if we want to keep trying to build these.
I think it's worthwhile trying to build the file for the archive that
Okay.
we have here.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, I feel like we put it to bed, but I'd say go through the summer and see what, you know, the woman you
Yeah.
mentioned, and if there's a red flag, then we go farther, but if there's not, I feel like
Oh, yeah,
it's not productive to just keep going forever and ever.
right.
We've met the environmental people that Lead Vents has hired. Have we had any conversations with Lead Vents themselves? And you know, are they standoffish?
I mean, they
Are they
came-
welcoming this idea, or you know, what's the general?
Non-committal is how I would put it, and you've met with them maybe more, but several representatives came, including their attorney, Ken Gray. And, you know, they didn't want to commit to anything about the house or at that point, we didn't have the environmental covenant, but they were definitely not being clear. And when they came, their engineer came and gave a presentation as well, explaining what, you know, sort of explaining what was going on. And DEP was at that meeting too, so we had one big meeting with everybody.
Okay.
I'd say they were, you know, they don't give out any more information than they have to. It's like they'll answer, and even then, I asked specifically about the house and the pad and the visual side, and they just said, we'll have to get back to you on that. And they didn't.
You know, I'm just trying to figure out a rationale by which they would want us to cite a solar farm on
The
this site.
only reason would be for the tax break for them.
And for feeling good, if there is
Positive
such a thing in the
publicity,
corporate world, you know,
Yeah.
positive public,
Although now that they're owned by, in China,
Stuff.
I'm not sure they care about that even.
yeah.
So it's not,
Can we create something so that there's incentive
like
for them
what?
to want it? I don't know. I mean, is that property on the tax rolls?
Yeah, they contribute a fair
Yeah.
bit.
I don't know. If I was a businessman and I had a site like this, I'd want to avoid liability and shed liability as fast as I could. And I'm just trying to figure out what advantage can we convince them that will accrue to them if they allow the site to go forward.
If, you know, maybe it's worth, I don't know if it's worth one more conversation with them in person. What do you think? Like with Ken? Or write the
Yeah.
letter and say, could we follow up with a meeting?
Yeah,
in the
I think it
fall or
should be
something?
Ken and Jack.
Jack.
And Jack.
So maybe one,
Yeah.
because I'm beginning to feel, I'm just going to throw this out there, that we kind of are reaching the end of what we can do as a task force, other than I see our role, sort of a long-term role for a subset maybe of, you know, we should stay on at least till we see the results of the well test, and if there's any future problems, then we need to be involved, and Joe needs to be involved, probably indefinitely, to review the engineering reports. But beyond that, you know, if everyone else is going ahead, like with the house and the Sylvania plant, and we really have no role in that, I'm beginning to wonder what our role is going to be down the road, other than monitoring the engineering reports. And hopefully between now and the fall, we can push for the house and the solar, and just do as much as we can to say seems like the best use, but.
Well, it does go back to the vision statement we talked about earlier. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really the foundation of our approach and how we act on that.
Yeah. Facilitates low-impact recreation, that's our ideal,
Mhm.
probably not gonna happen. But the other things, so I guess my question is to you, Julie, the task force serves the town, and maybe after we look at the report in the fall, we revisit what our purpose is then.
Well, I think that's a select board decision.
Yeah.
Because the board, that's who created and gave you your marching orders.
Right.
Yeah, but I think the task force needs to come to them with something
Right.
a recommendation either to
I mean,
cease and desist or disband or go on low, medium maintenance somehow in some form.
I mean, I could see it shifting to quarterly meetings to
Yeah.
review the reports.
I think there's validity in keeping the task force.
Yeah,
But like you said, maybe it's a quarterly. I mean, this, to me, is something that needed to be done for a very long time.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
so-
would have had a lot more names if we'd done it 10 years ago than we do now.
Well, there are more names. I mean, people gave more names. We could follow up on another, probably dozens potentially, but, so following up on a few and see if there's anything and then say we're done. All right, well, maybe we can wait till we see that report, see what Joe has to say, see if we have to keep pressuring DEP to do stuff, because I think that could happen. Based on that interchange with Joe, if people read that. All right. So, well, I propose if you can do those interviews, we write the letter, or you write the letters, we put an article in the paper sometime, next month or so. And then we wait until those reports come to us before we schedule the next meeting. Unless for some reason there's some red flag in your interviews, then we
Yeah.
might want to follow up and say we want to interview more people or something, but
Well, the one guy I can't interview until
until mid-July.
mid-July,
So
it'll be
just do the
end
summer.
End of summer.
And if there's other people think should be interviewed, we could send the names to Mark and,
Yeah, so in the news article, are you gonna ask for input from people who,
That would be a good way.
and then
Yeah.
who would be the
and we could let,
contact
if
person?
people have,
You. Well, I mean, we can make it the town and then I can pass it through to you.
Okay,
or to the
That's fine.
task force, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I enjoyed doing the interviews and I still have the time in my schedule to do them, so.
It's a shame walking that site. It's a beautiful site.
I know.
It really,
I don't want to rule out the idea of a trail, even if it's passing through, access from Route 220, I don't know.
I mean, it would
but-
be, maybe they would just donate along the shoreline.
Yeah,
That's walkable. I mean, it was a
I know.
with a real trail, it would be walkable.
Yeah.
I thought it was beautiful. I mean, we went down and then had to cross the gullies, but if you had it up above where the gullies,
I stayed with the,
yeah, through and the
with
shrubby
the,
part.
I stayed with the woodsman and.
That's what I do for a living,
Should have
Julie.
stayed with us.
That's what
We
you
made
do for
better
a living.
progress.
So I was like, I was staying with the 50-year-old woodsman who's like, I'm not gonna go leap over those things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was surprised how beautiful it was, actually. I was expecting to be a thicket of honeysuckle and multiflora rose. I
If
really
you got
was.
the MVLT trail crew in there, they would make bridges. and
Oh,
things
yeah.
people
Yeah.
could
I mean,
walk
it
on.
could be.
Well, that's the other thing. Maybe MVLT needs to approach them.
Well, MVLT is in a state of limbo at the moment, so we have to wait on that.
That was just a thought.
But yeah,
good
and
thought.
that was the whole point. I think that's why
It's a
I
good
was asked
thought.
to be on, just because I chair their land.
Well, not
committee.
only that, but
Well, they might be someone to get to participate in whatever letter we're gonna write. I mean, as a active community organization dedicated to preserving land along Madomic, I'm in the Madomic area.
Even just an easement, I don't know if they'd put
Right.
just an easement along, although there's nothing that can really happen along the shore anyway, so it would be kind of a formality.
I guess they could argue it's been preserved for umpteen years. Nobody's gonna do anything on that property. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, to spend their energy there, but I could approach them about it. But it doesn't seem necessary, given, how they have to spread their energy.
Right.
To put formal protection on a property where nothing can happen
Nothing
down
can
near the
happen
shore.
anyway.
But I do think, if there were ever, there's always been talk of a trail along the river.
Mhm.
And it really is nicer than most of the forested areas along the river, from just a natural community point of view, for what it's worth. And they could easily design trails in a place like that. If you've been to the Goose River Preserve, it's way steeper.
well, I mean, I know Riverwalk pretty much went away when Cabot went away, but
Yeah,
would have been
Hope springs eternal.
nice to have like that Riverwalk, and that would have been a nice extension. Because really, when you think about it,
Would have been perfect.
would have been perfect. and then you could extend it all the way down.
I know. So I wouldn't, I mean, it has the potential if things ever change. And, you know, usually conservation projects take decades sometimes.
I love your, see, I needed that.
Long view.
I used to work for the Nature Conservancy, and we were working on Appleton Bog. It took 30 years to put that together. You know, it's like with the projects with Madomic, you might approach a landowner, and 10 years later they come back and say, all right. You know, so you just can't think it has to happen and take no as a permanent no. But anyway, you know, so we have it in our goals, and I can talk to them to see if they even want to just walk it and think about that, but then we have to get permission again. All right, so how do people feel about that sort of approach for at least the near term, unless something changes? What do you
I
think?
think it's a good approach.
I mean, we could give a little report, you know, summarize this, give a
Yep.
report to the selectmen, and then,
I have time
Ask
at the
it.
next meeting if you want to come in,
when is that?
the 12th.
June? Do you want me to?
Sure.
June 12th,
Although I did have a request from a select board member that more than just the chairman come.
okay. I don't care.
When is the meeting?
June 12th at 6 o'clock.
I have never, let me just see if I,
I should be able to make it.
yeah, maybe if you came, you could talk about the
That would be good. The interviews.
interviews. All right, we could talk about that, I could do that. So 6 o'clock, you said?
That would be great.
So just let them know where we are.
And that'll automatically give it exposure to the papers because
Right.
they'll be here to report.
Maybe we could combine it and afterwards if they have
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good people that way.
Yeah.
All right, 6 o'clock.
June 12th is a Wednesday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Better not be a Wednesday.
Okay. All right. So we'll wait to see the engineering report to schedule, because I don't know when that's coming in. It sounded like it may come in sometime in the summer, but I'm thinking probably we wouldn't meet till end of the summer, early September. It sounds like it's coming in August, September. Does that sound okay to people? And we'll just, once we get it, we'll look at it, have Joe look at it, since we don't understand it fully, and see what they think. That interchange between the two was interesting. I don't know what to make of that. Why, I mean, I think just from DEP's point of view, this is such a minor site,
They've got bigger headaches.
way bigger fish to fry, so this just isn't a priority. So
Were you convinced by their argument that?
DEP's not at all. I thought Joe's was.
I really did too.
And they did say, at least they said they'll look at the engineering report and then revisit it. If they
They
just
did.
closed the door, I would
Yeah,
have been
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
upset.
They didn't close the door.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. We can't do any more than that. Okay, so if you want to share your letter when you get it drafted.
I will do that.
And, all right, and should we have, we talked about something in writing to the select board, the letter from the select board about the solar site, do you want to ask, or do you, they could do it after the meeting?
They're
maybe?
I'm gonna ask them at the
Okay.
meeting.
All right, good.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, my mom has Alzheimer's, and they're at the doctor's appointment, so that's why I'm like.
They're asking you what's going on.
Well, you know, I had her for a week, and I had some concerns, and so that's why we're kind of like, it's difficult when one's in UPenn and one's in Maine.
Yeah, oh God, that's hard.
It's
So I
amazing.
apologize.
It's
I'm,
amazing you can contact them the way you do. It's
it's
incredible.
well, and we watch her on this particular device. I can watch her in her own home.
Oh.
That's how we kind of figure that she's not wandering too far.
Mm-hmm.
But so like sometimes like if there's a motion, I can see her, and then, but I'm just trying to. It's very difficult when you're not there.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
okay. So are there any other concerns, thoughts?
So I was gonna share the interviews with the whole group, but there had been some discussion about whether that should be added to the timeline, and have we made any progress on getting that timeline?
Well, Mike kind of said he wanted help with that, but not, and I was hoping he could, that was on the agenda, so I don't know.
So is there apart from the timeline, is there a repository for all the work that the
Well, that's the
task force has
repository.
been Oh, that was the repository?
Yeah, it had everything, organized by, it might, I don't know if you want to, if you're savvy with that kind of thing, but I think, or if, no.
Absolutely not.
Is there anyone else who is? Because,
No, it's really Michael's baby. He came up with
Okay.
the
Yeah.
application, and
so
And
we'll-
they-
Yeah, he's just,
he's kind of been missing.
he's
action.
been snowed under.
Yeah. I'll email him and just say,
So if I.
maybe,
so if-
send him, why don't you send him the file and say, can you put this
I'll
on the?
include him on the list, but I just want to make sure that it's not dispersed when the task force disperses, that this file's not.
Right. Well, I would ask him to put it on. I don't know, Max, if you're keeping files in, like any
I
file
have a
that would.
question. You mean all the files from your interviews?
Well, it's one Excel sheet, it's just broken up into,
No names, right?
the names are on.
I don't think anything with names should go on any website. I would hate,
Person A, person B,
Yeah.
person C.
I would hate to
Give
have
them
any
sort of
names
anonymous.
disclosed,
So, yeah, maybe just say.
because
person
that
names.
could come back. I would hate anybody to ever say we jeopardized their pension or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think,
It's already
I
public
think just,
information, unfortunately.
How?
Sitting at this meeting talking about it and it being recorded on TV.
Well, we didn't mention names other
We
than.
haven't-
that.
yeah,
The agendas had names on them.
Yeah,
Well, I would
As
just,
long as we didn't attribute a particular comment to a particular individual, would probably be safe. As long as we
I would just take,
hide it.
Take the names off.
just redact them.
just interviewee 1, 2, or just no name, just not even a name spot.
Okay, so is there any reason to have some sort of key? I mean, I'm just,
I
guess that's-
You have to have some
I think
record.
that if you're gonna put it on the public website,
that's
then
true.
all the names should be redacted.
So what you give to Michael.
Right, what you get, yeah, if there's just one repository, which it should be us for all the records, they can have the names on it. I'm just saying,
I agree with the website.
so if it goes on the website, you can redact
Yeah.
the names, but what I send out,
yeah,
Mike will be CC'd and it'll
right,
be
that'll be
with the
fine.
names on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think we do have to have an archive, a central archive. I mean, it's probably all of our laptops. We all have stuff in folders filed away on our laptops.
All of the stuff for us that we have, even Michael's information that I have, is on our H drive.
Okay, well, then that's where this all ought to go. So,
Yeah, but it would be good to prepare that anonymous version and send that to Michael to put on, and hopefully he'll have the time to make it useful again. I mean, it was Dropbox and very easy to get at, so it's a question of, how can he make the link something we can click on and see it all
So,
again?
so send out 2 reports, one with all the names included and the second one with the names
To be
redacted.
put on the
Yeah.
timeline, and I'll send him an email just asking if he can continue to work on it so we can have access. Because it was a huge amount of work and it was really valuable. I mean, it had everything going back to, I don't know, 80s or something.
And Bob, you're gonna send me the name of that
yep,
woman?
Yep.
And her contact number?
Okay, well, anything else? Then I think we can adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Did we set a
No,
date
we
for
were
the,
gonna-
for the next
We're gonna
We
meeting?
were
wait
gonna
till-
wait till we got the engineering report, and we're not
So-
sure if that comes in August or September,
Oh, good.
so we'll just wait.